Somebody said, boy, you talk about yourself a lot. Well, I was afraid you weren't going to.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another great edition of the Garage Shop Insider. I'm Tim Packman. Today, we're talking to a legend, a Hall of Famer, a unique character in the sport of NASCAR and racing in general, the one and only Mr. Darrell Waltrip.
Here, present.
Darrell, there was a history in NASCAR before you started racing.
Mm-hmm. Not much, but some.
Then you made history.
Yeah.
The things that you did, 3 championships and all your 84 wins and everything, and memorable moments.
Yeah.
And now there's a history that's taking place now.
Yeah.
How important is it for everybody in general to remember that history and keep that alive?
Yeah, I guess for me, I thought that's what the Hall of Fame was all about, was to create some of those memories from the past, some of the pioneers, some of the guys that we stood on their backs. And, you know, I stood on Buck Baker and Joe Weatherly and Fireball Roberts, and I stood on their back and went to another level. And then people, Jimmy Johnson and Jeff Gordon and those guys, they stood on our backs and took the sport to another level. And now there's kids that are standing on their backs taking it on. So it evolves, you know. You can't, you got to know your history. You got to know the history of the sport. And quite honestly, I think I was in the golden age. I think the drivers that were in my era are the drivers that they had personality. They had stories. Yeah. They drove for so many different owners. And so I think it was a different time, and I realize that. I know you can't stand still; you got to keep always moving forward. But I'm very happy and very thrilled to have been in the 70s, 80s, and early 90s. That was my time, and I capitalized on that, and I'm happy about it.
So when you were coming up through the ranks, I mean, you started in 1972. Who were you looking at in the 60s and 50s, and who are the guys that you were looking up to when you were?
I wasn't looking at anybody. I didn't know a whole. I started racing at the fairgrounds in Nashville. Well, actually, way back, I started in Owensboro, Kentucky, and it's funny how it goes, because eventually I won every race. Every time I'd race in Owensboro, I win. And so I had to go, and I wanted to be a race car driver. I'd lay in bed on my little transistor radio and listen to the Daytona 500. And sometimes I could get it and sometimes I couldn't. It just depended on got it turned just right, or the coat hanger was just right. So, but I didn't know a lot of people. I thought when I started my driving career, I'd be at Indy. Really? I mean, I lived in Owensboro, Kentucky, which is right on the Ohio River, right across from Evansville, Indiana, and, you know, Indianapolis not that far away. And A.J. Foyt and Mario and Roger Ward and John Cock, and those were kind of guys that I was more familiar with. I hadn't really paid a whole lot of attention to stock cars. And I'll tell you what changed my mind. So I'm driving it at Whitesville, and they bring a sprint car over. Actually, it was at Ellis Speedway. They bring a sprint car over because Hopstad, Indiana, Tri-State Speedway is just across the river. Mm-hmm. So they brought a sprint car over for a little exhibition run. Well, the driver didn't show up. And so the guy comes, they say, you know this track better than anybody. Would you take our car out and run it a few laps? I said, hell yeah. You know, it's what I live for.
Have you ever been in a sprint car?
Never been in one in my life.
Perfect.
So I hop in that thing, man, and it pushed me off. And I mean, I know the tracks. Man, I'm throwing dirt up in the grandstand. I'm having a ball, and I'm loving it. And I come in, I park the car, and the guy says, hey, what are you doing next Saturday night?
Got yourself a job.
So I went to Tri-State Speedway, to Hopstad, Indiana, and that was a rude awakening, because the first night I drive the car, I go out in a hot lap, and I mean, it's a little bitty race, but not quite as big as Ellis Speedway was, so it's a little track. You throw that thing in there, and you got to gas it, and you got to go. So I coming in, and the guy was explaining to me, now, when you come in, you kick it out of gear, and you rev the motor a little bit to clear the injectors out. I said, okay, no problem. So I come back in, I'm coming down the pit line, I kick it out of gear now. Boom! I mean, these things would rev up like out of sight. And I barely touched the throttle. I blew the motor in his car. I mean, coming in the pits. So he wasn't happy about that, but I said, look, I don't know. I don't know what happened, but I think the motor blew up. So anyway, so I go back the next week, And this is my second week. I know the track. I'm getting a little more comfortable. And in the heat race, I left the ballpark. I hung wheels with somebody, and I went out of the ballpark, turned upside down, and I was laying out there in the field somewhere in a sprint car. Wonder it didn't kill me. And I knew right then, I said, well, that's the end of my open wheel driving career ended right there.
Okay.
I like roost. I like roll bars. I like to be confined. I like that a little bit better. So I never drove another open wheel car after that.
2 times.
2 times.
That's all it took.
That's all.
Perfect.
Blew the motor, wrecked. I went home.
So when you did start racing, there was history ahead of you, and so when you got on the track, there was veterans.
Yeah.
And then here comes Darrell Waltrip from Owensboro, Kentucky.
Yeah.
And you're looking up at these guys going, okay, I have 2 choices. I can either go out and race them, let them intimidate me,
Yeah.
or I can make my own name. What
Well,
did you?
but here's the deal. So I buy this Mercury from Holman and Moody, and it had been raced at Talladega, and so and it was a '69 Mercury when I bought it, and I wrecked it, and so we made it into a '71 Mercury like the Wood Brothers car, and so people always say, why was your first race Talladega? Well, that's when we got the car done. That was the next race when we got the car done. So Jake Elder is my crew chief. I don't even know what a crew chief does, but he's my crew chief. And Hudson Pagan had built the car, and it had a 429 motor in it. And so we go to, and it had a 427 tunnel point like at the time. So we go to Daytona or to Talladega. Well, I don't know if you remember, but in 1972, that's when they had the tire debacle. I mean, Goodyear had developed, they came with the slicks to start with. So then they come back to Talladega with a treaded tire. Well, this tire, I mean, it won't last 10 laps. It flies all to pieces. When I bought my car, it came with 16 slicks like they had raced there before. So that's all the tires I had. And Jake Elder was my crew chief, and he was livid. We'll never be competitive. You got to buy some. I said, man, I ain't got no money to buy tires. We're going to run these tires. That's all we got. But that turned out to be the hot tip. So I ended up leading that race. Me and James Hilton had a hell of a battle. He led, I led. He had a fast car. He had old tires. I had old tires. And I eventually blew the motor. Something happened to the motor, and I fell out of the race. I made more money selling my tires than I did if I'd have probably won that race. I think I made $2,500, $3,000 selling that used tires I had because that's what everybody wanted at the time. So that was my introduction into the sport. And I always thought, wonder what would happen if I'd have won that race. Holy cow! What would I wonder? They call me Jaws. I don't know what they would have called me if I'd have won that race. That'd been my first time out, my first time at the track. I win the race. This is a piece of cake. I should have been doing this all along. But anyway, I didn't. And I struggled a little bit from there on. But those early years, I knew Richard Petty. I knew he was the king. I knew David Pearson. He was my hero. David Pearson and Bobby Isaac were 2 of my buddies. When I had a problem or if I needed if I had a question, I'd go to Pearson, and he'd always help me out. I became great friend with the Wood brothers. Leonard and Glenn were really good friends of Stevie and I. And of course, Bobby Allison was my friend because Bobby had built our cars to run at the fairgrounds. So it wasn't like I didn't know anybody, but I didn't know them that well. And I was just some kid from Tennessee. And they all thought I had a lot of money because my father-in-law, Frank Rader, he was the president of Texas Gas in Owensboro. So they assumed because I married Stevie and he was the president of Texas Gas, we had unlimited funds. Well, we didn't. I would pay my guys on Friday and borrow it back from them on Monday because they didn't have the money to operate that week. So we struggled. We really struggled a lot in the beginning. But I think it was all for good. You know, I think the Lord had me in that position, struggled, had some success, and the way my career ended is not the way I would want anybody's career to end. I think Richard ended that way. A lot of us guys that had our era, but you know, it didn't end well. But I was having fun while it lasted.
So when I look at the history, and you're talking about, you know, some of the names you brought up, the Bobby Isaacs and that. So the garage shop, you know what Aaron and Brown and all the guys have been doing. They're preserving, you know, a lot of your cars are there.
Yeah.
Amazing collection you have there.
Yeah.
Everything from the number 88 Gatorade modified, the one at Daytona, to, you know, your Western Auto silver, what are the foil car you call it? Chrome car. That's it.
Do not call it a
sorry.
It's a chrome car.
Chrome slipped. Chrome car. What they're doing with the Bobby Isaac car and the Ford Talladega.
Yeah.
How important do you think that is that people now in 2021 know that what took place back then?
Yeah, well, I think most people think racing started in 1992. I don't think they know there's a history behind what happened. You know why 92? Because that's when Gordon started.
Jeff Gordon.
And he introduced us to a whole new market, you know, a bunch of young kids. But, yeah, I think when people would look at that wing car and they'd say, you mean they raced those? Yeah. You mean actually those things were on the track, or that Talladega, the Ford Talladega, they actually raced those? But I think aerodynamics dominates the sport today. I mean, you do things to your cars that chassis-wise that we would never consider doing back in the day, because we worked on the chassis and the body was just a body. Now they work on the body and the chassis just a chassis. So I think when people see those cars from the past, and I never forget, I think it was Chris Buescher went down to the Hall of Fame. My car was on Glory Road, and he went up and he looked in and he said, I wouldn't get in it. He said, that thing ain't safe. And it had those little skinny seat belts and had banjo seat, and you know,
steering wheel.
There's no headrest, no anything. You sit in that thing, and we sat on our cars. Right. They sat in their cars. You know, we sat up on top of the car and drove it. They sit down in them like they're in an airplane or something. So totally different time. Again, you evolve, things get better, your safety, you know, Earnhardt gets killed, and then we go to a whole new safety innovations, and so things happen that create new things that have to happen. But the cars that we drove, I always tell people, and I don't mean this in a bad way, the cars I drove would kill you. The cars they drive the nail only hurt you. I mean, you can hit the wall, you got safer barriers, they got these big seats, they got the headrest. You know, they're pretty protected. We weren't protected from anything. We needed to be protected. That's why we had NASCAR. When we would do things that probably no one else would do, NASCAR was there to say, oh, you can't do that. So it just evolves. I think that's the whole thing.
So the garage shop, because the reaction that we have received from just posting of pictures of the Dodge Daytona,
yeah,
and Bobby Isaac's number 71,
yeah,
and now the Ford Talladega comes
yeah,
along. It's been amazing. People that, you know, from, you know, your era, my era,
yeah,
and now younger ones, like, what's that? What's
yeah,
going on? So with the work they're doing, and it's pure passion. You know,
yeah,
that, you know, Aaron and the guys,
yeah,
and the work they're doing out of there has just been incredible to be done in 2021.
Yeah, it is. Well, there's not a lot of Aaron Browns around that will live through some of the history that he's lived through, working at DEI and for Ray and other places. You know, I mean, he's learned a lot, and he's like I am. You know, we have a whole lot more fun thinking about things that we have done than what we're gonna do, and I think those cars are just a product of the past. And I look at the cars and they're fascinating, because you wonder who ever thought about putting that big wing up on the back of a car, or the way that nose was sloped down. But I also think about the guys that drove them, and the Buddy Bakers and the people like that were really. I guess we felt like we were as safe as we could possibly be at that time. But then when you look at the way cars are today and the way the cars were back then, you say you'd have to be an idiot to drive that thing, and because we didn't have the safety innovations that they have today. So I love Aaron. I love the job he does. He and his people, they're all historians. They love the sport. They know the cars. They know how to build the cars. They built cars similar to that. So I love what he's trying to do, and I love preserving the sport and the history of it.
So the Era Wars, that ended just before you got started.
Yeah.
So you had to hear a lot about it, and you had to see some of it too, even if you're listening on your transistor radio there. But it was still a part of it that you came in like right after that. Well, it ended.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Junior Johnson discovered the draft, for instance. I think what that was 63 or 4, whatever it was, and so. What the hell is a draft? You know, what does that mean? Well, until you actually are out on the car and you actually sniff up behind the car in front of you, you know, like you picked up 100 horsepower, then you know what the draft is, and then it becomes a matter of a chess game. How do I use it? I know what it is, I know what it does, but what do I do with it? And I think Dale Earnhardt Sr. he was one of the first guys that figured out how to side draft. Mm-hmm. You know, we just drive up behind somebody, and that was drafting. He drove up behind you, get up beside and put his damn bumper in your door, you know, and slow you down and speed him up. And he called, and I never forget, I went to him, I said, what are you trying to do, wreck us all? He said, what are you talking about? I said, you almost drove into my door. He said, have you ever heard of side drafting? I said, No, I hadn't. Not till now, anyway. But anyway, you know, I was side drafting, and all of a sudden that became like a standard. Everybody side drafts. Run up guy, pull in, slow him down, he go on. So it just things we learn. I mean, a driver would get killed. A Joe Weatherly would get killed, and maybe didn't have the right seatbelt, or maybe didn't have the right seat, or whatever. And NASCAR would, and it's one of the things they're really good at. They would evaluate what happened and try to figure out how to keep it from happening again. And so they spend a lot, you know, fuel cells and interliners and just so many things that are taken for granted today that had to be developed. And somebody had to do the research, and somebody had to do the R&D, and somebody had to test it. And so a lot of guys back in the day were more like test pilots than they were race car drivers, but some of them survived and are able to talk about it, and some of them we talk about them and what their contribution was.
So speaking of the draft, I know you got my interest. Do you remember the first time you experienced it? Because you said your first race was Talladega.
Well, I didn't know what it was. You know,
so you're in the car and all of a sudden you're like, oh, I'm close to this guy.
I just thought I had a fast car. You know, but it's funny how you learn things. I mean, that was really, you know, as a driver, whether it was at Whitesville, Nashville, or Talladega, you'd go out and you would experience something, and you'd come back in and you'd say, what the hell was that? How did that happen? And so not always didn't always have terminology for it. We just knew what it did. And then, okay, so now I see how that works. So now what do I do? Where do I go from here? And it's always one step at a time. So I think aero wars were that way. I mean, you know, one guy gets his front end slooped down, the other guy gets his roof tucked in, and the fenders, you know, and they make the cars smaller. And Smokey Yunick was a great example of that. So aerodynamics was huge, and they helped the car a lot, but nothing overcame that chassis. I mean, back in our day, whether Jake Elder, Herb Nabb, Bud Moore, Jr., whoever it wasn't about how nice a body you had. It's what springs you got in that car, what shocks you got in that car, what sway bar you got in that car. That's what made the difference. And I was the onboard computer.
You were the engineer.
I was the guy that came in, right. I'd say, here's what we're going to do. They don't do that anymore. Right. The guy comes in now, they don't even go over and talk to him. They look at the computer. Right. And here's what we're going to do. I can't tell you how many drivers have told me, say, look, our crew chief come in and say, look, we've dynoed this car, we've chassis dynoed it, we've had it on the shaker machine. This car is perfect. Don't screw it up. And send him out. And how many races have you been to, watched? Normally, the first lap that car runs around that racetrack is about one of the fastest laps it'll run all day. So they have an optimum setup in the car to go fast. And I think where a driver, some drivers are more important, and some drivers can do a better job than others, is what do I need for the race? Because you can make a car go fast for a lap or two, but I got to run this thing 500 miles. And so what do I need in this car to make it drivable for 500 miles? That's where the good drivers excel.
So you talk about manufacturers, different cars, different looks. So you talk about how things have evolved through the evolution. They kind of look pretty much the same right now, except for maybe some front ends and some stickers. Yeah. But it's tough to look real quick and go, that's a Ford, that's a Dodge, that's a Chevrolet, a Buick. You know, some of the makes we've had.
I think I go more by the driver than I do the car. I mean, I know there's Toyotas, and they've been good to me and my brother. And I made all the races I won in Chevrolets. We've had Fords and Dodges. But when you line them all up side by side, other than different decals on the nose to give them a little bit different appearance from the nose back, they're pretty much all the same. And so I think parity is the worst thing that ever happened to any sport, whether it's football, baseball, basketball, or racing. We didn't live in that world. We lived in the interpretation world. Here's the rule. How do you interpret it? Here's the rule. How do I interpret it? And so I think parity, you know who parity, only person that parity is good for? The inspector. Because that was kind of the way it was going. Well, everybody's got the same but yours, and yours is different. And so you need to get yours like everybody else's. Okay. I can't tell you how many times they come and say, look, I don't know what you're doing. I know you're doing something, but don't bring it back.
So there's the gray area.
Yeah, a lot of gray. Well,
No, I'm talking about the.
plenty, there's plenty of gray area. I got that for days. But
you.
anyway, I hate parity. I think if you look at the racing today, and they put a kind of lock the teams down to the cars they have because of the new car that's going to come next year. I think that's parity because you can't develop any new parts. You've refined the car to absolute perfection. And so it really comes down to the crew chief and the decision he makes and how the driver drives the car. So, but when it was kind of a mixed bag of the rules and interpreting the rules, and he did this and he did that and somebody else did that, that was when it was fun. And you know why it was fun? Because it was challenging. It was challenging to go to the track with something a little questionable, and see if they could find it or not. And if they didn't, guess what? You probably won the race that week. You probably won the race that week. And maybe the next week. The best inspectors in the garage were the other drivers, the other crews. That's why you see, you keep everything covered up and you don't want anybody around your car because maybe you had a trick or maybe your spindles or maybe you have a 3/4 inch snout and a 1/2 inch. You never knew. Everybody had something a little bit different. And if somebody was kicking your butt, you wanted to know what it was. How are they doing that? What are they doing that we're not doing? So I hate parity, though.
So I'm going back. You brought up Bobby Isaac.
Yeah.
That car's iconic. I mean, if you think of a Dodge Daytona, that one for some reason always seems to leap into people's mind.
Yeah.
What are your memories of Bobby?
Oh, he and Pearson really were true. They were the first two guys that ever really kind of embraced me because I'd always been a big fish in a little pond. I raced Nashville. I won all the races at Nashville. Everywhere I went, I won. I go to Cup. I'm just another fish in a big pond, and so it was hard. Buddy Baker was pretty nice to me most of the time. Bobby Allison was my best friend when we started, and then David Pearson and Isaac, they would embrace me. They would help me. They would tell me, here's what you're doing wrong. Here's what you need to be doing. And I never forget. So I go out. We're at Daytona, and we're running. And I run up behind somebody. I don't remember who it was. I don't know. Maybe it was Richard Petty. And I got right up on their back bumper, and they started shaking their fist at me. And I said, what the hell? So I back off. I think maybe he's got a problem. Maybe something wrong. So anyway, I come in the pits, and I go over and I asked Pearson. I said, hey, David, I was behind Richard, and I wasn't doing anything wrong, I didn't think. I said, and he started shaking his fist at me. He said, next time, hit him in the ass. he said, he'll put that hand back on the wheel. He won't be shaking that fist no more.
He'll need both hands to drive.
He'll need both hands to hang on to that, baby. I said, okay, good idea. But that was the way. Pearson was great.
Yeah.
I mean, he was just down to earth. He loved racing. He loved to drive cars. And he wouldn't always give me, it wasn't eloquent necessarily, the explanations, but he had a racing mentality like no one else. I think Pearson, in my opinion, was the greatest driver we've ever had.
So we're talking about history. If he'd have run full time every season like the rest of you, could you imagine?
I mean, I know I worked with Jake Elder a lot, and Jake was his crew chief. Different people. I raced with Pearson a lot when he was with the Wood Brothers. He just had a knack about him. He knew what it took to be successful, and he didn't brag about it. He didn't talk about it. I can't tell you how many times I'd see that 21 car, and I'd just about ready to lap him, and a caution come out, and I'd say, well, where'd he go? Next thing I know, he's in my mirror. And I'd look behind me, he'd be smoking a cigarette. I got your ass. I'm coming around. You're coming around next time by. And we had some good battles together, and I just liked Pearson a lot. And I liked Isaac a lot. He was Isaac wasn't the most educated fellow in the world, but he too he had a great racing mentality. And Harry Hyde was one of my best friends. Harry was from Louisville, Kentucky. We had met a few times. Harry helped me a lot through the years. And I liked Harry. He was a good friend of mine.
I'll tell you, Donnie came over and saw the four-tailed egg, and you could just see in his eyes and his face, and
well, Donnie
it was all just coming back. So when you talk about the history, it was just like looking at him, and I was just like, "Oh, this is what really struck a nerve." And he acted like he just raced it yesterday, the way he was talking.
Yeah.
So.
Well, Bobby and I were great friends when we started because PB Crowell, who lives in Franklin, Bobby built all of PB's cars down at his shop in Hueytown. And so Bobby and I became great friends. And Judy and Bobby and Stevie and I, we stayed at their house. We worked on our cars. I worked on my cars there. He taught me everything I know about cars: springs, shocks, how to set a front end. And Bobby, we were great. He was a great friend. And Donnie, I didn't know Donnie that well, but then as time went by and I started to be where I was competitive, and I could race with those guys every week, then Bobby and I's relationship kind of deteriorated. When I got to where I could beat Bobby, he didn't like me anymore. And I'll never forget, Donnie told me, he said, "You know why he doesn't like you? Because he's cheating, so he knows you got to be cheating too." So it was just, and Donnie and I, we hung out together a lot. He would drove for Haas. Ellington Haas was a, crazy old car owner.
Oh, yeah. I've met him before.
And Runt and all those guys. That was I just liked that crowd. And Donnie and I hung out together a lot. But Bobby and I are good friends. Bobby and I have always been good friends. We're not good friends we were good friends off the racetrack. And Earnhardt was the same way. Earnhardt and I were great friends off the racetrack. Not always on the racetrack, but away from the track. Most every guy I've ever known in racing, you get them away from a racetrack, and there's a totally different guy than the guy that you see at the track.
You don't put that.
The helmet, it's too tight. I've looked at Earnhardt's helmet a number of times. What size helmet is this anyway? Oh, it ain't big enough.
So when you started, you said you were a small fish in a big pond. You went from big to small, and then you were the small fish in the big pond. Yeah. At what point in your career did you go, "Hey, I think I'm okay at this. I think I'm going to do all right"?
Well, I felt like, and I think you have to be confident in yourself, and maybe sometimes I was a little bit overconfident, but nonetheless, when I had my own cars and I knew how much money I had, and I knew what I had, I knew I was taking second rate at best and competing. I mean, I couldn't outrun Richard or Bobby or David or Cale or any of those guys, but I could hang with them in stuff that I'd bought from used parts I'd bought from Junior Johnson. So I always felt like if I ever get in a good car, I'm going to kick these guys' ass. That's just how I always felt. And I was just beginning to get my team capable of doing that. When the K&K Insurance Company, when they folded, Harry Hyde and all those guys, I was at Robert G's. Robert G's right across the street from where K&K, where they kept the car. Larry Reagan, Ray Fox Jr., all those guys came to work for me. And it wasn't like I was paying them a lot, but I think I've always had people knew that they wanted to be with a winner, and they knew I was a winner. They knew if I had the right car and I had everything going my way, I was probably a guy they were going to have to beat that day. So I had a lot of good people working for me, and then Dygaard came along, and I spent a lot of money. I'd go to Hudson Pagan, I'd go to Goodyear, I'd go to cities, wherever I'd go, and I might run up a bill, but I'd say, "Look, I'm not going anywhere. I might owe you money, but I'm going to pay you. I may not be able to pay you today, and I may not be able to, but I'm going to pay you. You don't have to worry about that." So that kind of got me by, and so I was right on the verge in '75 of really putting together something special. And then Dygaard came along, and Allison was driving for him, and they fired Donnie, 4th of July race, because I passed Donnie on the last lap to finish 3rd or 4th or whatever it was. And Bill Gardner, who turned out to be one of my better friends, but we weren't always friends. Bill Gardner said, "I don't know who that kid is in that 17 car. I want to hire him. I'm tired of him. He beats me every week. We're spending a fortune. He's not spending it. Well, I'm going to hire him." And so we went to Daytona the 4th of July, and my family, Stevie's family, had a house down at Vero Beach. So we go down to Vero and spend a couple of days. I come back by Daytona. I want to pick up my check, because back then either you waited at the pay window or you wanted your money right away because you had to pay your bills. So I stopped by Daytona to pick up my check, and I don't remember who was there at the time. Maybe it was Bill France. I don't remember. But they said, "Have you seen Bill Gardner?" I said, "No, why? What's he want?" He said, "They want to hire you." I said, "What do they want to hire me for? I got a lot better car than they got. I don't need to be driving for them." So anyway, So I get my money, and we're going down the road, and Stevie said, what did they want? I said, what were you talking to? I said, you won't believe this, honey, but Bill French just told me that Bill Gardner had told him if he sees me to tell him he wants to talk to me, they want to hire me. And she said, what'd you tell him? I said, well, I laughed at him. I said, that's ridiculous. I got a better car than they have. Are you out of your mind? Do you know how much money we're so deep in debt we'll never get out of debt, and they want to hire you? Are you crazy? I said, well, I can't do that to my guys. I mean, I just can't do that. So we're going down the road from Daytona to Charlotte, and going to Robert G's house. And we stopped at a gas station to get some gas, and who was there but Jim Gardner, Bill's brother. And Jim said, we have been looking all over for you. We want to hire you. I said, ain't no way, man. I got it. In the middle of the year, I got a car, I got a team, I got people. I just don't see how that's possible. He said, here's my number. Call me when you get to Charlotte. So I get back in the car. We're going down, and I tell Stevie, and she said, you got to call him. You got to call him.
Right.
So I get home, and I call him, and sure enough, we strike up a deal. Until the middle of 75, I went to drive for Dyegard. And the only difference in their deal and my deal was I didn't have, I wasn't having to spend the money. They were spending the money, and I was getting to drive, which is kind of a win-win for me. But 75, I think I won one race. Maybe I won Richmond. I think I might have beaten Lenny Pond at Richmond that year in Dyegard's car. It was my car, but I had their name and everything on it. We had cars, and they were better than theirs. We used my cars a couple of times. Then in 76, we signed a Gatorade deal. Right. We were still in Daytona, down on Fentress Boulevard. And Bill Gardner, who didn't know anything about racing, he thought, well, NASCAR headquarters is here. That's where we should be. We need to be right next door to them, which was actually a bad idea. But nobody had the nerve to tell him. But I did.
Why was it a bad idea?
Well, I mean,
I think I know, but I want to hear why you.
They can send people over to the shop anytime they want to.
Check out your stuff.
What are y'all doing over here? Check out the motor, check out the car. We're right next door to them.
Too close.
I said, you got to be way far apart. So anyway, I finally talked them into moving to Charlotte. We did. We hired Robert Yates. We had Buddy Parrott, David Ift, Frog Fagan. We had we had a hell of a bunch of guys, and the engine program, Ducky Newman and Mario Rossi was our engine guy when I first went there. The engines last about 20, 30 laps, blow all to hell. Just couldn't finish a race. So we moved to Charlotte, hired some good people. Yates comes to work for us. The motor starts are good. And then in 77, that was my first big year when I won Darlington. I think I beat Bobby back to the finish line to win Darlington. I went to Talladega, won Talladega. And that was the start of a little run that we had there, 77, 78, 79. We fought with Richard right to the bitter end at Ontario, lost the championship by 11 points, my fault, made some bad decisions. Learned a lot of valuable lessons. One of the things I took away from that was don't beat yourself, because that's what I did that year. Twice I beat myself. Twice, if I hadn't done something stupid, I would have been the champion in 79. Then 80, Gardner and I get in a battle about I don't want to drive the car, and Junior Johnson wants to hire me, and so we go through that whole rigmarole, and finally I get out of the Dyegard deal and I go drive for Junior, and that was golden.
What was the one thing about him that just, if you were to say describe Junior Johnson and what made him so good and so unique?
Well, I mean, he was a genius, and you would never know. See, the thing about Junior, I raced against Cale and Herb and Jake and me, and we raced against those guys, and I'd knock his bumper off one week, he'd knock my bumper off the next, and so we were rivals, really big rivals. And I'll tell you, in 1980, the reason I went to drive for Junior was Cale came to me at Charlotte in May, and Cale and I had become pretty good buddies, and Cale put his arm around me and he said, I'm going to tell you something, boy. He said, I'm leaving Juniors at the end of the year. I said, you got to be kidding me. He said, I ain't told nobody else. You're the only person that knows this. He said, and I know what Junior wants to hire you. He said, so you need to get to work and see if you can't get yourself in a position to get over there. So that's how I knew that Junior wanted to hire me, and I thought, God, I mean, can you imagine? I'm a kid. I'm in Owensboro, Kentucky, listening to the race on my transistor radio, and every now and then I hear about this guy, Junior Johnson. Junior Johnson, he runs moonshine. He's a moonshiner. He's been to prison. He's been in prison. He's driving a Chevrolet. Nobody drives a Chevrolet. Number 3, are you kidding me? And he wants to hire me?
Heck yeah.
I was blown away. I mean, I couldn't believe it. And of course, I had just signed a new 3-year deal with Dyguard because I really didn't have any options. So here I am, just signed a new deal with Dyguard, and the greatest car owner of all time wants me to drive his car.
So were you able to hold on to that secret, so to speak, from May until?
Oh yeah.
Okay, because you can.
Yeah. So I started trying to figure out how I'm gonna get out of his contract.
Gotcha.
Well, it was irrevocable. You couldn't. It was. They had some clauses in there. You know, Gardner. He had all these attorneys that worked for him, and Dyguard was the first place ever where he had to sign a contract. Everywhere else, a handshake.
Handshake does it.
I'll see you later. And that was across the board. And whether you were a crew member, a driver, a truck driver, a floor sweeper, everybody had to sign a contract. And so anyway, I had this contract that man, how am I going to get out of this? Well, it took a lot of manipulating and a lot of things we did that probably couldn't get away with today, but we got away with them, and I was able to get out of that contract.
Like what? Give me one thing. Is there one thing you can share that you did?
Well, we taped a conversation that we shouldn't have taped.
Okay.
That was one thing.
All right. I'm just curious.
Yeah.
You brought up. Okay.
But that was actually turned out to be not a bad thing.
Okay.
It was against the law, but it wasn't a bad thing. Anyway, we got out of that contract and went and drove for Junior, and that was the best thing I ever did.
Yeah.
It cost me $325,000 in 1980 to get out of that contract.
That's
$100,000 per year.
That's a good chunk.
And you know what the 25 was for? We're in an office just like this. I got the check for $300,000, which they didn't think I could come up with, but I did. Junior got 100. My father-in-law got 100, and Pepsi gave 100. So that's the 300,000. So we're about ready to sign the release, and Gardner said, "Ho, wait a minute. You owe me $25,000 more. What? Yeah, you owe me $25,000 more. He said, I just thought about this. I said, what? You're in the Bush Clash, aren't you? And they called the Bush Clash at the time. I said, yeah. How'd you get there? You got there in my car. And you probably win it. So I want my half of it now.
So he was banking on you winning the race already because he knew you were going to such good equipment.
Yeah.
So he came up with 25 grand more.
And guess what?
You did it.
I won it.
Okay. So he was right.
So it took a little time to recover that 300,000, but we did, and the 25, that wasn't a big deal. But and that was the start of one of the best times of my life. 6 years I drove for Junior, and 3 championships and 50-some wins, and just an incredible time in my life.
Speaking of incredible time, you got the nickname Jaws.
Yeah, I did.
You got the. Hey, don't run. You own it. Okay. So, and back in the day, before we had all the social media and Twitter and Facebook and all that, where if someone looks at you sideways, it's a big deal. When that was Kel Yarbrough, right? He put that on you.
Kel.
You didn't really run away from it, and you owned it, and you gloriously at times made news or made waves, let's say, being Darrell Jaws Waltrip.
Yeah. Well, the movie Jaws had just come out.
All right.
So Cale and I were racing each other in the Southern 500 at Darlington. And he would lead, and I'd lead, and I'd lead. And if I'd come off a corner, turn 2, and DK over in the middle of the damn racetrack, and I went low, and Cale went high. I got down in the sand and the stuff, got on my tires, and I come back up in the track, and I hit Cale, and I wrecked him. And they asked Cale what happened. He said, Jaws wrecked me. And I said, Jaws? What the hell? He said, yeah, all he does is go around chewing up cars. That's what he's known for. So anyway, it stuck, and a few weeks went by. And so I said, so what? So I'm Jaws. I don't really care, You're short neck. So what? Or no neck. I actually didn't have a neck. But anyway, so we go to Charlotte, and Humpy Wheeler, Humpy, P.T. Barnum.
Oh yeah.
So he decides he's going to get a shark. So he went down at Myrtle Beach, got a shark, about a 10-footer, live. Brought it up to the racetrack, put it on hooked it in the back of a wrecker, and stuffed a chicken in its mouth, and rode that around the track in the pre-race show.
Well, and the chicken was because at the time
Cale was driving for Holly Farms.
Holly Farms, right.
So Jaws just ate up the chicken, and at first I thought it was funny, and then I thought, nah, this is going a little too far, and so anyway, we Jaws stuck, and I was Jaws for a long time.
Well, but it went from the shark eating up cars to maybe you saying things and antagonizing.
We had the Kale scale.
Sure.
You know.
Yeah.
They'd say, "What's this, Ray?" Well, the Kale scale is about a 9. Or Richard, he needed to get his prescription windshield changed. I don't think he saw what happened that time. Just bad attitude, Bobby Allison. I was having a ball. I was having the time of my life. Unfortunately, nobody was having fun but me. And it all came to a head at Charlotte. I was leading a race, and I blew up. And I'd been to the Kmart the week before, or the Friday night before the race. And I had a line around the building, and people were, wanting an autograph. And so I wrecked on the back straightaway when the engine blew. I'm right in front of this grandstand, and I didn't know, but it was the Ford grandstand, and Bill Elliott ended up winning the race. But when I wrecked, people started cheering, and I was pissed.
Right.
I said, "You got to be kidding me. I could have gotten killed." So we go around, they take me around, and they said, "What happened back there?" I said, "I don't know, but I'm telling you right now, I wish all those people could have met me at the Kmart." That's what I said. But the next day in the newspaper, it says, "Waltrip challenges fans to meet him at the Kmart." and I said, No, that wasn't the way it went at all. But anyway, you can't retract it. So anyway, Jaws would challenge people to come to Kmart and fight it out, I guess. I don't know. But anyway, it got kind of ugly after that. And then I started downplaying. And then we had kids. We didn't have any kids. So in '87, we had our first child, Jessica. And that changed everything. It changed my perspective, changed my personality. It just changed a lot of things. Because I was a dad. I wasn't just a race car driver. I wasn't just Stevie's husband. Now I'm a dad, Jessica. And I started thinking about her and what's going to be like for her. And so I went I really personally went on a campaign to turn that all around. And you don't change your image. I mean, once you got an image, you're kind of stuck with it. But in 1989, I won Most Popular Driver of the Year. And Richard Petty, I'll never forget. Richard Petty said, "That boy might win a lot of races, but he ain't never going to win Most Popular Driver." So yeah. So I proved him wrong.
Yep.
And then I did again in '90. I won 2 years in a row. I think other than Earnhardt and Elliott, I think I'm the only other guy that's ever won there in the last 30 years. His name's on that trophy besides theirs.
So when you look back at some of those moments, did you, let's say even now or even when it took place, do you go, "Oh, maybe I shouldn't have said that," or "I really need to say that"?
No,
or
no, I'll tell you right now, if I'd have had to race against me, I'd have whipped his ass. I'll tell you right now. Because it was not a nice man.
Yeah.
It would say things that were just inappropriate. Shouldn't be saying things like that.
About what you said or just other people?
What I would say about
okay,
them.
Got it. Okay, got it. Yeah. Okay.
But anyway, it was fun. And if Kale won the race, the headlines might be, "Well, Waltrip said." It didn't matter who won the race. It was what I said or what I did. And I kind of like that.
You did like the attention.
I like that.
Okay.
Like I told you, people say you talk about yourself a lot. I said, "Well, I was afraid you weren't going to."
And here we are.
Here we are.
So when you were out racing, you talked about when Pearson or come up behind you. Who was the one guy on a restart you looked up in the mirror and said, "Oh, not him"?
Kale.
Kale Yarborough.
Kale was like a junkyard dog, man. He was tenacious. Now, he lashed on that bone. He wasn't going to let go of it. And he was a tough competitor, funny, one of the funniest guys ever. South Carolina, got that South Carolina twang. Mm-hmm. When he got inducted in the Hall of Fame, some of the stories he told were hilarious. I love Kale. I think he's one of the best drivers we've ever had. And Bobby Allison. Bobby was pretty tough, too, at the time. So those guys, and certainly I didn't want to look over and see Earnhardt.
Right.
That's the last guy I wanted to see. I wanted to see him at the rear of the field if I was at the front. I always loved Earnhardt because you race Earnhardt, had to, and I'd never forget it. Man, and I'd finally get around and say, "Whew, finally got by that SOB," and look in the mirror and I'd say, "Damn, what was I thinking?" Because he ain't gonna wreck me now.
Yeah. And you guys had your tangles on the track. You
Yeah.
guys, or you're at Richmond. They show the famous where you two wipe each other out.
Yeah.
Was it Bodine goes by and takes the win? So you
Petty.
guys had
Petty.
Yep, Petty. So
Kyle Petty.
Correct. Thank you. So after the races now, I mean, there's cameras all over.
Yeah.
Did you guys have your conversations? Did you have your tussles that no one knows about that we didn't get to see?
Always.
Yeah.
Always.
Was it verbal, physical? Was it both? I mean,
you never knew. So you'd confront a guy after a race if you were pissed enough.
Sure.
But now, I'll never forget. or some race on recently when I was still working, and something happened on the track, and a couple of guys got together, and it was you could obviously tell one was at fault, and I'll never forget what the guy said. I'll text him tomorrow. I said, you gotta be kidding me. You're gonna text him tomorrow? What kind of confrontation is that?
Beat his ass now.
You go whip his ass right now. So anyway, again, it's evolved. You know.
All right, back in the day, what's your most memorable post-race tussle, confrontation, conversation that you can remember?
Oh man.
Pick a good one.
Well, I won Richmond, and I think I knocked. I didn't mean to, but racing accident. I think I slid Richard up out of the way to win the race. Certainly the Martinsville race in '87 that I won. Dale's leading, Terry's running second, I'm running third, and I bumped into Terry going into turn. Accident, I didn't mean to. Yeah. Bumped into Terry, he bumped into Dale. They both spun out, and I won the race. '89, win the Daytona 500. See, the thing about that race people don't realize, I just realized this myself. I led the first lap of that race, and I led the last lap of that race. It don't matter what happened in the middle. You know, it doesn't matter where you were or any of those things. I led the first lap, and I led the last lap. That's all that mattered.
Perfect. But you don't have a post-race, like anyone that you had a...
Oh, listen. Trying to think of some of the... I mean, I had plenty of 84 wins. You have
sure.
Every now and then.
There's that's 84 times of...
Certainly the All-Star race, you know, when Rusty spun me out on the last lap.
Yep.
We had a hell of a fight that day. Yep. That was a big deal. But I don't know. They all kind of run together now. Right. There were some good days and some bad days.
Speaking of the good days, as a driver, what do you miss most?
I don't think there's any better feeling than a car that's just handling like you want, that handles really well. I know people say, "Oh, I miss all the people in the garage." I like the people in the garage, but I don't care whether they're there or not. I really was concentrating on my car. And you can ask Hammond or anybody that ever worked with me. I mean, I was a fanatic about that car. And I learned that from Bobby. Bobby taught me, let the car do the work. If you've got to carry the car, you're not going to last. So you got to have the car carry you. And so I can't tell you how many Bristol races we'd be on the jack stands changing spindles or something on the car when the other cars all be on the line except us, because it just wasn't right. And I had this knack, I kind of learned it from Pearson and others. I knew how to make it go fast, but I wanted to know how to make it go long. And so what would go fast for 1 or 2 laps was not what you needed to run 500 laps or 500 miles. So I really focused on having a car that was really good in the race. Long run car. I really concentrate on that. And that was, I love my cars. That's why I loved owning my own team, because I love building the car and get it all finished. And I was I'm a clean freak. You know, I got paper towels under one arm and a Windex in the other. So I was a clean freak. And so everything had to be just right, and the car had to be perfect. And I can't tell you how many people, Rusty Wallace would come up and say, "You got the neatest cars I've ever seen." But it had to be that way. If it wasn't running, it had to at least look good. So that was kind of the way I was for a lot of the times. But I don't know. I was just a little peculiar about some things, and how a car looked was one of them. I always thought I had great looking cars. Paint jobs, you know, whether it was the Gatorade car, the Mountain Dew car, the Tide car, the Western Auto car, all those cars were extraordinarily good looking cars, I thought.
So you came into the sport, you were peaking, you were making everybody mad, you were winning, and then guys were coming in behind you.
Yeah.
What was that transition like for you when you realized?
That was hard.
Oh.
Yeah, some of the as exciting as winning a race and being in a victory circle was, it was just total opposite. I mean, I missed some races. You know, there's some races I didn't qualify for. And I wasn't very competitive the last 3 or 4 years of my career. And that hurt. When you've been to the top, it's not so bad if you kind of slide down the other side, but when you fall down the other side, that hurts. And so, I think a lot of that was, you know, I think that was the Lord working on me. Just, you think racing is the greatest thing that's ever you've ever been involved in, you need to think about that. You might want to get a second opinion about that. So, anyway.
Who's the Darrell Waltrip of today?
Oh, Kyle Busch, no question.
I kind of thought that.
Hands down. Yeah. He picked up right where I left off, and he hadn't let up much. He's mellowed out a little bit. I mean, every year the media says, "Oh, the new Kyle Busch." Well, that doesn't last very long. So,
Right.
but there's probably, who knows who will be the next, the next Jaws. You just never know. But Kyle's taking up the slack that I left.